Hi, I'm Jadi and welcome back to your journey to LPI lessons. We are going through LPI 1, now we are on exam 102 and we've reached to the 1082 system logging. This used to be 3, but now the weight is increased to 4. And it is very important. If you know what you are doing with your logs, you are a much better system administrator. Logs are one of the things that we are super proud of in the Linux world. In general, you know what logs are. Any program which is running writes something somewhere and says, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, this happened, this happened, this happened. Just like your daily journal if you write one, but in much more detailed. Every program, even the kernel itself, all of them when running, they just say what they are doing. This is super cool because if something bad happens on a Linux system, you always can go through the logs and see what happened. Or even if nothing happens bad yet, you can go through the logs and see, okay, the system which logs who is trying to log in, saving lots of data. Someone is all the time trying to log in tens of the times in every minute. Someone is trying to guess your password with a machine. Brute force attack. So logs will show you this. If your system crashed, you will go through the logs and see what will happen. Actually, this week we had a ticket. I'm not in the support, but I saw support struggling with one ticket. The customer was asking about a permanent crash in one of the applications. I packaged that application, so I'm subscribed to all the tickets related to that. It was happening all the time. Our support was restarting it and everything. At the end, I went, tried the logs, although it's not my job, but thought to help and say what? In the logs, we had that memory increased and now the memory is not enough. So kernel killed PID blah blah to recover memory. So it was a memory issue. Practically, it was a leakage, and we have to ask why we had that memory leak. But you can see that from the logs, we can say what happens. If you watch a Linux admin sitting behind the Windows computer, she's struggling and pulling her hair and saying, where are the logs? Logs will show us what is happening on the system, and we love our logs. So let's go through them and see how they work. As I've told you, different programs, Linux itself, all the services produce logs. But what happens if we put this burden on the shoulders of the programmers? Someone has written a service, SSHD, which lets people SSH. They have to create a file, save their logs somewhere. Someone else created a service, HTTPD, a web server in the Apache. They have to create a file, create the logs, and check if they are too long, delete some of them. This is very difficult. First, every programmer should reinvent the wheel. Second, as a system admin, you don't have consistency between your logs. Every program may do a different thing with its log. So in the system, in the Linux world, we have a central logging system. For example, syslog. Or later generation, syslog ng, syslog new generation. Or what is being used nowadays are syslog, for example. And every program just sends their log with a specific protocol to this system. If I have a new log, or even if I'm writing a shell script, I can easily use one command and send a log here and say, I am Jadi's shell, I have an information for you, this is the information. And I will send all of them to this central logging system. This central logging system will have its own configuration file, which says, okay, if anything from Jadi, save it in this specific file. Anything from one of the services, save it here. If anything critical happens, save it here. Also show it on the terminal of the root user if root user is logged in. I can plan all of this from a central location. And every other programmer you can easily just send your logs. You don't need to think about the size, what is going to be happen about this, what happens if the system disk is full, whatever. You just send to rsyslog. rsyslog will take care of everything. And the system admin will have all of its logs in one place. Even you can accept from the remote servers and send your logs to another log server in the server. So this is a very nice method of working. Most cases, our logs are in normal text files, Unix philosophy. So you can use commands like less to check your logs. Or for example, grep, whatever you want there. You can use your logs to examine the system, find issues, find problems, or just do a monitoring. See how many people are sending requests to your HTTP server, because every request is logged in a file. There are also other commands starting with Z, like z, less. This can run the less on a compressed file without opening it. You don't need to open it somewhere, then check it. It can do the less on the compressed file. Or zcat, same thing. Cat shows you the contents of a text file. Zcat will show the contents of the compressed file directly. We have different logging systems. As I told you, the older ones was syslog and then syslog ng. Nowadays it's rsyslog. And also some parts are being controlled by journalctl, which is part of the system D. In this series, I will talk about these basics. Also will show you some very common logs in the Linux systems. Will show you a couple of tools to manage your logs. And then on the next part, I will talk about rsyslog, and then in another section, I will talk about the journal D. Okay, so be with me. This is a fun fact I've brought to you. How this logging works. It's fun. Dev log is a device on the Linux machines. Whoever wants to send anything to the logging system will write into this device, and your central logging system will always read from this device. So you have a device, it's enough to write your log there, and your logging system will read whatever is written there and will process it. So it's a very good architecture. Although you don't need to do this directly. Most of the time you have libraries, you have tools, and you just call them, they will handle this part. But there is another fun question. Your system boots up. Kernel loads itself. Then it needs to check the hardware devices. It sees a hard. The hard disk uses, for example, ext file system. So ext file module should be, ext module should start working, will mount this disk, and now you can write your logs on the disk. What happens to these logs? We love our logs. We cannot lose these. What happens here? Or even the system is working, the disk crashes. Your kernel is up and working and produces logs, even logs about this crash. Where does this go? There is some facility inside the kernel. It is called Kernel Ring Buffer. This is you. Kernel Ring Buffer. It's a memory place inside the kernel which is able to hold lots of logs. And these logs will go there before the kernel can write its log to the disk via different systems. There is a command Dmesg which shows you these logs. If you issue Dmesg on a Linux machine, it will give you lots of information. Let me do with a less. Dmesg less. This is the seconds after boot. 0 seconds 000. Booting Linux. Cool. It logged that Linux version is blah blah. It logged that it's a EFI machine. Logged that I'm seeing these devices. It logged that zone ranges Direct memory access is here. Movable zone start for each node, still 0. Nothing passed, even milliseconds. If you go down, everything which is happening, CPU features detected, kernel is booting up. I see that my CPU do have these possibilities or properties. You go, and for example, here you can see that, okay, this much has passed in seconds, and my ACPI interrupts are enabled. PCI boot bridge. All the logs while system is being booted up can be seen here. Till if I go with Shift G to the end of it, 2 seconds passed, and now kernel can write its logs to the disk. So kernel is writing to the disk and doesn't use Dmesg anymore or kernel ring buffer anymore. And Dmesg shows them. So this is one of the facilities where you can check logs from inside the kernel itself even before disks are ready to be used. This was one fun thing. Another aspect is showing you some very, very general logs, some famous logs on all the systems. All the logs are in var log, at least based on the convention. You can save anywhere you want, but var, variables, log, logs. So here, if I have an ls, you will see that I have lots of files here containing authentication log, cron log, syslog, user log. We will see many of these. Some of them are very famous. For example, outlog shows you authentication logs. If I do a less outlog, it says, okay, Jody tried to do a sudo on this time. Interesting. In the home Jody. Session opened based on PAM for sudo because sudo worked. Now root is there. Cool. Login failed on 0 for Jody at this specific time using XTM. I wanted to connect remotely to my graphical machine. So this is how you can check many, many logs with less, grep, and everything. Some of the famous logs were out, you saw it. syslog or messages. On some machines, I believe on Debians, we have syslogs. On Fedora and RPM machines, we mainly have messages. If some log doesn't have a very specific file to go, it goes to the var-like messages or var-like syslogs. These are very, very weak assumptions because all these can be configured, and I will show you how these are configured on the next section. But you can have an idea. Var-like debug, all the debug level messages will go here. If you have a service, for example, cron, and cron wants to send a log to the logging system, it tells, okay, I am cron, I have a log with the info priority. Debug is a very, very, very low priority. Whatever the program does tells, okay, debug, I'm starting. Debug, I'm reading my file. Debug, I read my configuration. I read my configuration. Debug, I'm trying to connect, whatever. Info is like, okay, info, I read my logs. Info, I'm connected. Info, I'm starting. This much. And you have, for example, errors. If it sees an error, you have even criticals, emergency. So on different levels, we can produce logs. Most of the debug logs will go to var-like debug because you can just keep 1 day of debug. But on the errors, you may want to keep 1 year of your error logs. Var-like kernel logs are here. Also, there are some logs which are not pure text files, like UTMP, WTMP, BTMP. Blacklisted, whitelisted. Some woke people don't like these words, but the point is, black is okay. It was blacked out not to be readable. And all the logins. These are related to the logins. So you can check them with the last command. If you issue last, it will show you all the successful logins to the system. If you say last blacklisted, it says, okay, BTMP tried to log in here. Here, I changed my terminal to a real web server, which I'm using for my site. This is nicer. Last shows me all the successful logins. Also, reboots are kind of logins logged here. If I do a last B with a less, okay, I don't have permission. I thought there is no last. Okay, last B with a less. These are unsuccessful logins. You can see someone is trying to hack me. This IP is sending lots of root logins and trying different passwords. Trying if there is a JBoss process. Trying BSO manager, super admin, IMAM, whatever. Trying to guess different logins. And I have all of them here and they're trying to hack me. But let's continue and later I will block them. You have to block those IPs. Last log, and okay, these were some of the logs I wanted to show you, and also service logs will go here too. This is my main web server, so you can see I have lots of different logs here, and some programs create a dedicated directory for themselves and put their logs there. So if I go to HTTPD, you will see that I have lots of logs here. Let me fix this issue with my arrow. Okay, I have my pen back. It's not arrow anymore. And you can see that, for example, in the HTTP directory, HTTPD directory, which is my web server's log directory, I have different logs. This is the latest access log to my site, jadi.net. And these are the error logs. These are the jadi.net error logs. And the web service, Apache, writes its logs here. But this file will become larger, and unmaintainable. There are methods to control this. The main one, which is the last thing I'm telling in this part, is logrotate. It rotates logs. Let's have a look. Where are you, logrotate? It's here. So, what is the problem? For example, Apache, my web server, is creating its access logs here. Whoever comes to jadi.net, don't come, it's in Farsi. Whoever comes to jadi.net, one line for each request, one line is added to this file. This file will be huge very soon. Unmaintainable. So what should be done? I have to go and delete it. Not very nice, because I have other things to do. So I can have a job which is called logrotate to rotate these logs. This is the latest version of jadi.net.com access log. There is also one jadi.net.com access log on this date. There is another one, jadi.net access log, a week ago. Another one a week ago, another one a week ago. So it's keeping 4 older ones and the latest one. How this works? This is very lovely. etc logrotate, less etc logrotate conf. It's a program with its configuration. It says by default, if nothing is mentioned, rotate the logs weekly. So each week, rotate my log. If you have a file which is called f.log, every week create an older one, flog0, flog1. Next week, this will become 0, 0 will become 1, 1 will become flog2 and flog3. Because I have rotate 4, so keep only 4 of them. Create. If this doesn't exist, create it. Date extension. Instead of saying 0, 1, 2, 3, add the current date here, just like what you saw. Compress is not default. So compress these instead of just, so if I have flog and 1 week passes, create a new flog, rename this to flog current date, and if compressed was not commented out, create a gzip of this one and read all the configurations from logrotate D2, because other programs may have their own logs. For example, for WTMP, the one you saw, all the successful logins, log it monthly. Minimum size should be 1 megabyte to be rotated. If it's less than 1 megabyte, don't do anything. Create a new file with this access, belongs to root and this group, and just keep one of them. Let's have a look at this directory too. So I will go to cd etc logrotate d. Every program which is installed have a configuration also here. This is for the HTTPD. It says, okay, also check this directory. Whatever file here with this pattern, if it's missing is okay, no problem. Not if empty. If the file is empty, whatever log here, for example, flog is here and it's empty, don't do anything. Shared scripts, run these scripts afterwards. And delay compress. So, default was 4 weeks. I have flog and it was weekly. So each week we'll visit this, we'll rename the current one to the current, add as current date here, create a new flog here. Next week, we'll rename this to the current date, create a new flog here. Next week, another one, and only keep 4 of them. This was the default. But I say delay compress. So, first week, flog is there. Next week, renames this to the current date, but doesn't compress it. Although in my configuration, I didn't had compress, so it does nothing. But it says, okay, compressed only the next week. Let me tell it more clear. If I had compress, and if there is delay compress here, and I have flog will be renamed to the current date, but won't be compressed because it says delay compress. So it creates a flog, and the new logs will go inside this one. Next week again, this will be renamed. This will be compressed because delayed. 1 week is delayed because I said do this weekly. This is done because sometimes my HTTP server is still writing in exact same file and I don't want to start compressing it immediately. I said compress this next week. Anyway, these are too much details and you don't need them. You need to know how in general logrotate works. You saw the configurations and you have these kind of configurations. We saw all of them. If you are interested, you can see that we have a cron daily for the logrotate. So it runs daily and sees what it should do. A fun hint is it doesn't run exactly in the midnight. It runs somewhere during the day and changes the file name. So if the file name indicates specific date, you may have a few lines from the previous day or a few lines from the next day. If you were looking for the exact log, check the previous day and today too, because this does this rename exactly on the midnight. That would be too pressure on the server. Although if you really wanted to do that, you could remove logrotate from here and add it to a real cron job on the midnight. Have fun. Let's continue. This was longer. The next ones are shorter. I wanted to say more fun, but this was super fun.